So way too many people think that learning to code should always be fun, that you should enjoy every part of the process and you should do only the things that you really enjoy. And sure, yes, in the big picture, you should enjoy coding if you want to become a programmer. That should sort of be the point. But what actually gets results in the long run are painfully boring, repeated actions done for a very, very long time that are not always that fun. I am a software engineer who left the corporate world to pursue my own projects. And it's actually only after I left the corporate world to build my own things that I've actually become a much better programmer. Because when I'm coding things on my own, I actually end up coding a lot more. And when I code a lot more, I end up becoming a lot better. Shocker, right? So it is not doing more courses. It is not spending more times in meetings with my team. It is not about reading about Vercel on Twitter or looking at big salary numbers on levels.fyi that makes me a better programmer. It is actually coding more. So if your goal is to become a better programmer, your only goal should be to figure out how can you code as much as possible and how can you code in the right way to actually make you a better programmer. And this process is not always fun. Most of the time when you're coding, you're spending time debugging, you're spending time writing some very tedious code to finally one day get to the end result of your project or something like that. And this process is not always fun, but this is the process that you need to go through if you want to become a good programmer. So let me tell you the 5 painfully boring, dangerously effective habits that I have been able to cultivate over the past few years of me being a programmer to keep churning out more code even when I don't want to and even when I don't enjoy it, to keep improving as a programmer really fast. And this is something that you can apply to your own coding journey no matter the stage where you are at right now. It's not going to be fun, but it is going to be damn effective if you apply even some of these tips. And tip number 1 is to be scrappy, not perfect. So one of the biggest lessons from coding up my own startup is that building something to 90% good will take 10 times less time than building something from 90% good to 100% good. Just before this, I filmed a video where I talk about the process of actually how I code projects, and the high level of it is that at any stage, I'm just thinking about what is the most important thing that I should code next to add to this project. And the more and more you build, the less and less important the things that you're adding to the project actually become. And at some point, especially if you're just building hobby projects to learn, then it becomes not so important to add the small tweaks to like make the UI look perfect or like make everything absolutely centered on the screen or deal with every single edge case. So if you're worried about making your projects perfect and you're looking at the workload of all the things you'd have to consider, all the cases you'd go through on your code to make a perfect project, then you're just going to be paralyzed and you're not even going to end up starting, which is going to end up making you write less code and therefore learn less. And a bonus coding habit that you absolutely cannot ignore is that you should always be trying to increase your knowledge in terms of how to learn the code, in terms of the tech industry and things that are happening in it. And this is something that I struggled with when I was first learning. And that is why today I have created my free newsletter, Internet Made Club, where every single week I send you a free email with highly valuable tips around learning the code, things that are happening in my life, what I am learning as a software engineer, things that are changing in the industry. And also simply as a bonus for signing up, I'm also giving you free access to my online computer science degree template, where I've essentially compiled a full curriculum that is equivalent to a full computer science degree simply from online courses. So that is going to be sent to you straight away after you sign up. And of course, anytime if you don't like the content, you can simply unsubscribe. So that link is going to be down below. And with that, let's move on to the next habit. And the second tip is to optimize your lifestyle. Now, this will be a very different kind of tip than you might be expecting to hear on this channel, because this isn't technically related to anything to do with coding. But the core problem we want to solve here is to get you to write more code. And what do you need to actually be able to write more code? Well, what if you could always feel like coding? What if you always just had this like urge in your brain, like I want to do more work, I want to do more, I want to learn more? What if you could just train your brain to think like this at all times? Well, shocker, you would actually end up doing more work and therefore learning more. And the thing is, there's actually a way to do that. You see, humans, we are governed by our hormone. You know how sometimes you just don't feel like working, you feel very lethargic and working is the last thing you want to do, you procrastinate, things like this. But then sometimes you're really motivated, you really feel like working. Well, there's actually a hormone inside of your brain that is dictating which one of those feelings you have, and that hormone is testosterone. Having high levels of testosterone gives you that feeling of you want to work, like you enjoy the sort of painful, not fun process of learning to code and coding projects. Well, there's a lot of research around this, and you can like research this on YouTube if you want all the details, but essentially, if you live a healthy lifestyle, as in you eat healthy, you eat good quality natural food, that is going to jack your testosterone up. If you work out, you exercise regularly, you move even for half an hour a day, that is proven to have very positive effects on testosterone. Perhaps most importantly, if you get good sleep. Do not be one of those guys whose sleep schedule is all over the place, who are sleeping like 4 hours a day. Get the amount of sleep that you actually need in your body, because that is so good for your testosterone. If you just do these 3 things, you'll notice that throughout the day, whenever I'm going through periods when I'm doing all of these things, like I just feel like I can take over the world. Whereas, for example, last week when I was traveling in the Philippines, I was not really doing much, I was eating quite unhealthy, like I was just feeling so lethargic, and working was the last thing on your mind. And when you have people like me who most of the time are completely optimized with testosterone and all these kind of things, like you just can't compete with me if you are not doing these things. And the third habit is to become a hermit. Now, another thing besides lifestyle that highly correlates with the times when I got my best work done is when I'm just committed to a period of time of just having no fun, where I'm just like inside of an apartment. I'm going through this period right now. I'm in this apartment here in Kuala Lumpur, and this month my focus is nothing else but just working and having a strong routine throughout the day. Because a lot of the time, to get effective work done, to really make progress, you need to be in this stage of mind where the only thing in your mind is your work, whether it's learning to code or your business or whatever you're doing. So to get your best work done, you need to go through like long periods of time where you are just in this stage. It doesn't have to be forever, but just schedule in these periods into your life, because it is absolutely essential to getting that work done, is to achieving your goals, especially in the beginning stages when you're learning something new, like you're first learning to code. Next tip is to abuse the hell out of AI. So to learn to code, shocker again, you need to work hard. This is sort of the entire point of this video. You need to work as hard as possible, but at the same time, you want to be strategically lazy, especially as a programmer. Nowadays, coding most of it from scratch, what I'm simply doing is I'm describing as much as possible and getting AI to write as much of the code for me as humanly possible. And it's only once I get to the stage where the code I'm writing is so like ungeneric that AI just cannot possibly do it well, that I start doing it manually and doing the tweaking to the code that AI gives me manually. Because a core skill as a programmer is not just being a workhorse who just writes out a bunch of code. It's just getting as much output as possible. And with the AI tools that we have, there is simply no reason for you to do something manually that AI can do for you much faster. Where you should be spending your human time, your human brain power, is think about what to code. The actual writing of the code was never actually the valuable part of coding. The valuable part of coding is deciding what to code, deciding which frameworks, which databases to use, how to design the application, not from a visual perspective, but from the perspective of what do you actually put in the application, what is the actual flow that the end user needs to go through to use your application. All of these decisions are actually the important part, where the software is actually made. And then the writing of that code, while you obviously need to be able to do it, oftentimes AI can do it for you much faster, and then you can simply move on to the next decision and the next part of your application, rather than spending your human time on the execution of writing the code. Tip number 5 is no days off. It still amazes me how many people there are who want to become software developers, who have no skills, who are completely broke, yet they still think, oh yeah, I can take weekends off, it's fine, there's 5 days a week, it's good enough. Like, how are you not panicking that you aren't good enough yet? Now, I'm not saying you should be doing this for the rest of your life and you should never enjoy your life. Obviously not. I've been enjoying my life a lot over the past few months, but I wasn't doing that when I was just getting my career off the ground. Generally, in anything that you do, especially with learning a difficult skill like coding, you need to do most of your work in the beginning. It's by far the hardest thing in the beginning, when you have no experience, you have no connections, you have no foot in the door in the industry, you have nothing to show for anything basically. You need to do all of this legwork to learn this skill from scratch and then build a projects and apply for jobs and interview, that is really, really hard work. But once you get over that first hump, you get your first job, you get some experience under your belt, then your life becomes so much more easier, because it's always much less work to maintain your skill than it is to build your skill. It is much more easy to keep making money once you're already making it than to increase your income from 0 to whatever level you need. So it makes a lot of sense to simply periodize your work-life balance, not in terms of having work-life balance every single day throughout your life, but having no work-life balance for a period of time in the beginning, and then having a lot more work-life balance later on once you've already built your skill. You can think of this in terms of building muscle. It's much more difficult to build the muscle than it is to maintain the muscle after you have already built it. So if you're a beginner, I don't care what anyone says, you should not be taking any days off. If you're actually ambitious, if you actually want to do this, you actually want to make this happen, you should be committing to a period of just grinding like a hermit until you get your foot in the door, until you get to what I call the cruising altitude, where you're just like cruising, like already good at coding, you already have a good job because you're so good at the skill that you can just keep executing and people keep paying you because you simply have the skill already. That is when you can start cruising, that is when you can take it easy, but that time is not now if you are a beginner. And the last boring habit you absolutely cannot ignore is watching this video and adopting the 7 coding habits that I go through in this video. Absolutely essential in terms of the actual process of how you code and how you learn to code to make you into the right kind of programmer that companies want to hire. So if you ignore these habits, then you can basically ignore everything here, because none of it is going to be as effective as you need it to be. So go watch that video next, and I'll see you there.